The champagne glass shattered before anyone saw who dropped it. And for one sharp second inside the glass-roofed charity hall, every wealthy smile and buckhead froze around the same impossible sight. A 340-pound black woman in a wrinkled midnight blue dress was standing beside the auction stage with a stolen donor bracelet in her palm, while the woman accusing her of theft was already laughing as if the verdict had been decided before the trial began. Naomi Brooks did not run, did not beg, and did not hide the bracelet behind her back, because after 29 years of being treated like the easiest person in the room to blame, she had learned that panic only fed people who were hungry to humiliate you. She held the bracelet out on her open palm, the diamonds catching the chandelier light like little knives, and looked directly at her cousin Patrice, who had arranged this whole evening with a smile glossy enough to be printed on the invitation. Patrice had invited Naomi to the Korean-American Children's Relief Gala for one reason, and Naomi had known it the moment the email appeared between a rent reminder and a decline card notice. The Brooks family had not included her in anything elegant for nearly 4 years. Not birthdays in rented lounges, not Christmas brunches in hotel ballrooms, not even the funeral reception for an uncle who had once slipped her $5 bills when she was a child. They remembered her now because Patrice had married into Atlanta money, needed a family success story table to polish her image, and wanted Naomi there as contrast, a living before picture in comfortable shoes. Naomi had almost deleted the invitation while eating cold noodles over her kitchen sink after a double shift at the dialysis center, but the name of the charity had stopped her. Children's relief mattered to her, and because her grandmother had raised her not to let cruel people own good causes, Naomi clicked accept with one thumb and went back to cleaning soy sauce from the counter. The evening had been designed to make her feel large in all the ways people meant as an insult. The dress she bought from a clearance rack pulled too tight at the shoulders. The cheap heel inserts were already slipping inside her shoes, and the ballroom chairs looked delicate enough to judge her before she sat down. Patrice hugged her at the entrance with both arms hovering above Naomi's back, careful not to crease the satin, then guided her to the side table near the service doors where donors placed half-empty glasses and staff passed with trays. Every old family wound arrived in formal wear. Aunt Marlene looked Naomi up and down and asked whether she was still doing that hospital work, as if keeping kidney patients alive was a hobby. Cousin Darius joked that the caterers might mistake her for management because she looked comfortable near food, and 3 women laughed into their champagne, while Naomi adjusted the strap of her bag and counted the exit signs. What none of them knew was that Naomi had not come empty. Inside the hidden pocket of her bag was a small brass key wrapped in a coffee receipt from a Korean bakery on Buford Highway, and inside the receipt, written in neat black ink, was a phone number she had not called in 19 days. The key belonged to a locked cabinet inside a private clinic, and the number belonged to Han Ji-woon, the most dangerous man she had ever met, and the only one who had ever looked at her pain without trying to turn it into either pity or entertainment. 6 months earlier, Ji-woon had arrived in Atlanta under a false business title, representing a Seoul logistics empire that appeared clean on documents and cast a much darker shadow through the ports of Busan, Incheon, and Savannah. Naomi had not known any of that when she found him bleeding behind a closed clinic door at 2:13 in the morning, a gunshot hidden under a ruined coat, one hand pressed against his ribs, and the other holding a black rosary made of jade beads. She had been working overnight intake at Mercy South, a tired clinic that treated people with no insurance, no patients left, and no one waiting for them at home. The security camera above the back entrance had been broken for weeks. The vending machine hummed like a dying insect, and rain knocked against the alley windows with the steady violence of thrown gravel. Ji-woon had come through the rear door without permission, supported by a young Korean man whose white shirt was soaked dark at the sleeve, and Naomi had done the one thing that would later place her name in the mouth of men who whispered before speaking of him. She locked the intake room, shoved a crash cart against the door, called the off-duty nurse who owed her a favor, and kept Ji-woon awake by asking ordinary questions while blood warmed the towels beneath her hands. She asked if he had allergies, whether he could move his fingers, why a man with cufflinks worth more than her monthly rent was bleeding in a charity clinic instead of a private hospital. He had answered only some of it. His name, he said, was Han. He was 41, from Seoul, and the men looking for him could not be allowed to find him inside a building full of sick children and old people. His voice carried the calm of someone who had already measured the room, the exits, the distance between Naomi's hand and the phone. Yet he obeyed when she told him to breathe slower and stop trying to sit up. For 3 hours, she helped keep him alive with supplies that were not enough, courage she did not have time to question, and a stubborn fury that someone had brought violence into the one place in her life where suffering was supposed to be met with care instead of strategy. Before dawn, his people arrived in 2 black cars, silent and precise, led by a woman named Seoul who looked at Naomi's badge, the bloody towels, the locked door, and then bowed her head just slightly, as if acknowledging a debt that had rules attached to it. Ji-woon came back 8 days later with his wounds stitched properly, his face pale beneath expensive restraint, and a debt he said could not remain unpaid. Naomi had expected money, maybe a hospital donation, something clean enough to forget. Instead, he sat across from her in a bakery that smelled of red bean, butter, and dark coffee, placed the brass key on the table, and told her that if anyone ever tried to punish her for helping him, the key would open a cabinet containing proof of who had ordered the attack and why her clinic had been chosen as the trap. He did not flirt. He did not soften the truth. He told her that his family in Korea had enemies inside their own bloodline, that a cousin in Seoul was working with an Atlanta developer to turn charity clinics into laundering fronts, and that Naomi had accidentally stepped between a dying man and a business arrangement worth millions. She should have thrown the key back at him. She should have told him that no decent woman with overdue bills, swollen feet, and a mother's old Bible on her nightstand had any business keeping secrets for a Korean underworld boss whose apologies came with armed drivers parked half a block away. Instead, she kept it because the first document he showed her had the Mercy South Clinic logo on it, and beside that logo were forged signatures, falsified patient counts, and the name of Patrice's husband's foundation in a place it had no moral right to be. Naomi had spent months pretending the key was only metal, not a loaded future wrapped in thermal receipt paper. She had ignored Ji-woon's calls after their 4th meeting because the more she learned about him, the harder it became to divide danger from protection, and the harder it became to deny that he treated her size, her tiredness, her bluntness, and her silence as parts of a person, not problems to be corrected. Now, in the Gala hall, the donor bracelet in Naomi's palm had become the trap closing around her. Patrice lifted her voice just enough for the nearest tables to hear that the bracelet had been missing from the auction case and Naomi had been seen near the display. A security guard stepped closer, one hand at his radio, while Darius raised his phone with the lazy cruelty of a man hoping humiliation would go viral before dessert. Naomi's chest tightened, not from shame, but from the clean recognition of design. The bracelet had been slipped into her bag during the restroom crowd, and when she found it beside her lipstick and the brass key, she had understood too late that Patrice was not merely mocking her tonight. Patrice was trying to remove her from the room before the foundation's final donor announcement, before the forged clinic purchase could be celebrated under chandelier light. Naomi looked toward the auction case and saw a tiny black camera clipped beneath the velvet display shelf, angled not at the bracelet, but at the donor table where Patrice's husband, Everett Cole, was laughing with 2 Korean businessmen whose faces Naomi recognized from Ji-woon's cabinet files. One of them was Han Suk-min, Ji-woon's younger cousin, the man whose signature appeared on shell companies feeding money through medical charities from Atlanta to Seoul. The bracelet suddenly weighed nothing compared to the key in her bag. Patrice kept talking, sweet and wounded, saying she hated to do this to family, but theft could not be ignored at a children's charity event. And Naomi heard her own name ripple through the room with that old familiar tone, the one people used when they had been waiting for proof that their low opinion was wisdom. Then the side doors opened, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the exact pressure of authority entering a room that had mistaken itself for safe. 3 Korean men in black suits stepped in first, followed by Seo Yerin in a cream coat, her eyes scanning exits and hands. Behind them came Han Ji-woon, taller than Naomi remembered because memory had made him human and the room made him something else, dressed in a charcoal suit with a narrow silver pin shaped like a crane at his lapel. He did not look at the bracelet, Patrice, or the donors rising from their seats. His gaze found Naomi with painful accuracy, moved once to the guard's hand near the radio, then returned to her face. He crossed the ballroom while every conversation thinned into breath, stopped in front of her open palm, and said in a low voice that carried farther than it should have, "Naomi, did they touch your bag before or after they found the key? Naomi, did they touch your bag before or after they found the key?" Ji-woon asked, and the question moved through the gala hall with more force than an accusation because it named a second object no one was supposed to know existed. Naomi closed her fingers around the bracelet, not to hide it, but to stop her hand from shaking in front of people who had already mistaken endurance for weakness. Patrice's smile faltered for the first time all evening, a tiny break at the corner of her mouth, while Everett Cole set his champagne down too carefully on the linen table. Naomi could hear the soft buzz of Darius's phone still recording, the squeak of the security guard's shoe on polished floor, the old soul song fading through the speakers because even the DJ had sensed that the room had shifted from embarrassment into something with legal consequences. "They found the bracelet," Naomi said, keeping her voice even because Ji-woon had once told her that panic makes liars generous, and she had remembered the sentence against her will. "They haven't found the key yet, unless Patrice already knew where to look." The name landed exactly where she meant it to land. Patrice turned toward the nearest board members with a wounded little laugh, saying Naomi was confused, overwhelmed, probably embarrassed, and everyone needed to calm down before the evening became uglier than it had to be. Ji-woon did not interrupt her. He let her spin the lie fully, the way a patient man lets an opponent overcommit. Then he looked at Seo Yerin, who removed a slim tablet from her coat and tapped once. On the screen appeared footage from the ballroom's own service corridor, grainy but clear enough to show Patrice standing beside Naomi's bag, while a waiter blocked the view from the room. For a moment, Naomi could not make herself look away from the image. It was not surprise that held her there, because Patrice's cruelty had stopped surprising her years ago. It was the smaller insult inside the larger one. The intimacy of a cousin knowing exactly which pocket Naomi used, exactly how little the family would question a theft accusation against a fat black woman who worked too hard and owned too little. Patrice said the footage proved nothing, that she had only moved the bag away from spilled wine, and Everett stepped in with a lawyer's smile, the kind that polished threat until it looked like concern. He told Ji-woon that private security footage could not be displayed without authorization, that this was a philanthropic event, that accusations against donors could damage children who depended on their generosity. Ji-woon listened with his hands relaxed at his sides, the jade rosary visible around his left wrist, each bead passing once under his thumb. "Children are already damaged when men like you buy them for accounting purposes," Ji-woon said, and the words were not loud, but they cut through every attempt at social recovery. Seo Yerin touched the tablet again. Bank transfers appeared, followed by company names, shell addresses, clinic acquisition documents, and photographs of Mercy South's rear entrance taken on the night Ji-woon had nearly died. Naomi recognized the broken light above the alley door, the rusted dumpster, the water stain on the brick wall that looked like a map of Louisiana. She also recognized her own signature on a patient intake form she had never filed, placed inside a packet authorizing emergency relocation of clinic services. Someone had not only used her clinic, someone had used her name as a disposable hinge in a door built for criminals. Naomi's throat tightened around a sound she refused to make. She had been careful all her life in the way working women become careful, checking every form twice, keeping rent receipts in envelopes, saving screenshots of schedule changes, because one missing detail could cost her money she did not have. Seeing her name forged in a room full of relatives who had laughed at her poverty felt dirtier than the bracelet accusation. Ji-woon turned slightly toward her, not touching her in public without permission, but close enough that she could smell cedar soap and the faint medicinal trace of the salve he still used along his ribs. "The key," he said quietly, "was never only for my protection. It was for yours, because the cabinet contains the original intake logs with your handwriting, and they prove someone copied you after the fact." Everett's face hardened. The charming donor disappeared, so quickly Naomi wondered how many people had been harmed by the man beneath it while applauding the surface. He nodded once toward the same security guard who had approached Naomi, and the guard moved, not toward Ji-woon, but toward her bag hanging from the chair. Naomi reacted before thought arranged itself into language. She stepped into his path with all the weight people had mocked, planting herself between his hand and the bag as if her body had been waiting years to become a wall instead of a target. The guard stopped because he had expected fear, not resistance, and Naomi saw in his eyes that hesitation could be a door. She swung the heavy bracelet case against his wrist, hard enough to make him curse and drop the radio, while Seo Yaren's men crossed the distance with quiet speed and took him down without breaking a glass on the table. The room erupted into layered noise, chairs scraping, women gasping, board members demanding explanations, Patrice crying now in a way that sounded practiced but less useful than before. Darius lowered his phone for the first time, his face pale, probably because the recording had captured too much to be funny. Naomi grabbed her bag and felt the brass key still inside the hidden pocket, warm from being pressed against her body. Jiwoon looked at her then, and for one raw second the controlled Korean boss was gone, replaced by the injured man from the clinic who had watched her block a door with a crash cart and tell death to wait its turn. "You should not have had to do that," he said. And Naomi almost laughed because the sentence contained more apology than a roomful of her family had managed in 4 years. "I've had to do a lot of things," she said, and the bitterness in her own voice surprised her less than the steadiness underneath it. She turned toward Patrice, who was backing away from the table, one hand wrapped around her phone, eyes jumping toward the service corridor. Naomi understood that look because she had seen patients wear it when bad news arrived before they had invented a story to survive it. Patrice was not only guilty, she was afraid of someone beyond Everett, beyond the foundation, beyond this ballroom. Before Naomi could speak, Patrice raised her phone and whispered something into it, too low for most people to hear, but not too low for Seo Yaren, who repeated the phrase in Korean under her breath. Jiwoon's expression changed with such restraint that only Naomi caught the danger in it. "What did she say?" Naomi asked. Jiwoon kept his eyes on Patrice. "She said the clinic woman still has the ledger." Naomi felt the room tilt around that one word. Ledger. Not cabinet. Not key. Not bracelet. Something else had been inside Mercy South, something Patrice believed Naomi had taken. Then memory opened with cruel precision. The night Jiwoon bled on the intake room floor, the young Korean man with the soaked sleeve had pushed a folded patient chart under the supply cabinet before losing consciousness, and Naomi had found it after they left, assuming it had been dropped by mistake. She had locked it away in her apartment because the names inside were Korean, the numbers made no sense, and fear had told her to stop asking questions until she could breathe. For 6 months, the most dangerous evidence in the room had not been in Jiwoon's cabinet at all. It had been in a shoebox beneath Naomi's bed, under old birthday cards from the grandmother who taught her never to throw away paper too quickly. Jiwoon saw the answer on her face. So did Everett. That was the problem. Everett moved first, grabbing Patrice by the arm and pulling her toward the service doors, while one of the Korean businessmen at the donor table reached under his jacket with the calm ugliness of a man who had already decided the charity gala could become a crime scene if the alternative was prison. Jiwoon's men spread through the room, shielding guests, redirecting panic, closing angles without drawing weapons where families could see. Naomi should have stayed behind them. Every reasonable part of her knew that. But the ledger was in her apartment, and her apartment had a landlord who left the front gate broken, a neighbor who worked nights, and a spare key hidden under a cracked flower pot because Naomi had once locked herself out after a 16-hour shift. If Patrice had called someone, then someone was already going there. "My apartment," Naomi said, and Jiwoon turned fully toward her. "They know about the ledger, and I think I know where it is." He did not ask why she had not told him, which hurt more than if he had, because the reason stood between them with the face of her own fear. She had kept a secret from a man whose world punished secrets, and now that secret might burn down everything he had tried to keep away from her. Jiwoon gave one order in Korean, sharp and low, and Seo Yaren was already moving before he finished. Naomi started toward the exit beside him, bracelet still in her hand like a ridiculous weapon, when her mother's sister, Aunt Marlene, stepped into her path crying that Naomi had brought gangsters into a charity event and ruined Patrice's life. Naomi stopped long enough to look at the woman who had mistaken respectability for goodness all her life. then placed the diamond bracelet on the nearest table as if returning a piece of evidence to the world that made it. Outside, the Atlanta air smelled of rain on hot pavement, and the first black SUV had barely rolled forward when Naomi saw smoke rising in the direction of her neighborhood, thin at first, almost dismissible against the city lights. Her phone vibrated in her bag. The screen showed 3 missed calls from Miss Clara next door, then a text with no punctuation and all capital letters. "Naomi, your building is on fire." "Naomi, your building is on fire," the text said, and for a few seconds inside the moving SUV, Naomi could not hear the engine, the rain striking the windshield, or Ji-woon giving orders in Korean beside her, because every sound in the world had collapsed into the image of a shoebox under her bed and a cracked flower pot by the front gate. The ledger was paper, but the building held people. Miss Clara with her oxygen tank and purple slippers, the twins on the second floor who left toy cars in the hallway, Mr. Alvarez who slept through alarms because his hearing aids whistled at night and he took them out before bed. Naomi pressed both hands against her phone as if she could hold the walls upright from miles away. "People live there," she said, and Ji-woon's answer came immediately, not comforting and therefore more useful. "Then we get them out first, and the ledger second." The SUV cut through traffic with terrifying discipline. Seo Yaren's voice came through the speaker from the car ahead, reporting that Atlanta Fire Dispatch had received the call 4 minutes earlier, that police were on the way, that 2 unknown men had entered Naomi's building through the rear stairwell 11 minutes before smoke was reported. Ji-woon did not look surprised. That was how Naomi knew the night was worse than fear had made it. He asked Yaren for building exits, hydrant positions, camera coverage, and the nearest hospital route, each question precise, each answer tightening the net. Naomi sat huge and breathless in the leather seat, her dress stretched across her knees, her cheap shoes slick from the Gala floor, and hated herself for every day she had left the ledger untouched because danger seemed easier to survive when it stayed folded in cardboard under old birthday cards. When they reached her street, the fire had not yet eaten the building, but smoke poured from the rear stairwell in thick gray sheets, and residents were spilling onto the sidewalk in pajamas, work uniforms, bare feet, carrying cats, plastic bags, and the stunned expressions of people whose ordinary night had been torn open. Naomi was out of the SUV before the driver finished stopping. Ji-woon caught her wrist, not hard, only enough to make her look at him. There was ash already moving through the rain like dirty snow. "Tell me where," he said. She gave him the apartment number, the bed, the shoebox, the ledger wrapped in a yellow scarf, the spare key under the flower pot. His face changed when she mentioned the flower pot, not anger, exactly, but the controlled pain of a man discovering how many small, ordinary vulnerabilities poverty had forced into the life of the woman he loved. Naomi did not wait for permission after that. She moved toward Miss Clara, who was sitting on the curb without her oxygen, coughing so hard her shoulders shook. Naomi knelt with effort, her knees screaming against wet concrete, and wrapped her arms around the old woman's back while calling to Mr. Alvarez to get away from the entrance. The twins were crying near the mailbox, one holding a melted plastic dinosaur, and Naomi pulled them against her side with the same body people had mocked for taking up space, making herself in a shelter while firefighters dragged hoses toward the building. Behind her, Ji-woon's men worked with the eerie competence of people accustomed to controlled disaster. They did not interfere with firefighters. They cleared cars from the hydrant, opened the side gate with bolt cutters, carried a half-conscious man from the laundry room, and formed a line that moved residents away from falling glass. Ji-woon disappeared into the smoke with Seo Yaren before Naomi could stop him. She saw only the back of his charcoal suit, one sleeve already dark with rain, and the sight struck her harder than the accusation at the gala because this was the part of him she feared most, the part that walked into danger as if his own body were simply another resource to be spent. She wanted to scream that the ledger was not worth him, not worth anyone, but Miss Clara's fingers were digging into her arm and a paramedic was asking questions and the twins would not let go of her dress. Naomi answered what she could, gave apartment numbers, named who lived alone, pointed toward the second-floor window where Mr. Alvarez's nephew sometimes stayed over. Every detail she had learned by being the kind of neighbor people underestimated became a map that saved time. 10 minutes later, Ji-woon emerged carrying the yellow scarf under his jacket, coughing once into his fist, while Yerin came behind him with a blackened laptop bag Naomi had not even told them about because she had forgotten it existed. His face was streaked with soot near the jaw, and the lapel pin shaped like a crane was gone. He placed the scarf-wrapped ledger into Naomi's hands without ceremony, as if returning something that had always belonged to her right to choose. "Your spare key was gone," he said. They were inside before the fire. Naomi unwrapped one corner of the scarf and saw the ledger's cover, smoke-stained but intact, the Korean characters still visible across the top. Inside were names, dates, clinic codes, shipping routes, payments marked as donations, and besides several entries a small red stamp she had once seen on Ji-woon's rosary pouch. His family mark. The betrayal became clear in pieces, not as a dramatic revelation but as accounting, which somehow made it colder. Han Suk-min had used children's clinics in Atlanta as false recipients for medical supply shipments that were never delivered. Everett's foundation supplied the American paperwork. Patrice recruited family-linked charities to make the events look community-driven. The attack on Ji-woon had not been random. Suk-min had tried to kill him near Mercy South because the clinic was already compromised, and a dead Korean boss found beside fraudulent files could be explained as underworld violence far from respectable donors. Naomi had ruined that plan by locking the clinic door, calling help, and keeping a ledger she did not understand. For 6 months, Patrice had laughed at Naomi in group chats while knowing her cousin was the only reason the whole machine had not already buried its evidence. By the time police arrived in force, Ji-woon had already made the next move, not with bullets or threats, but with exposure so complete that violence became less useful than silence. Yerin sent the ledger scans to a federal investigator Ji-woon had been quietly feeding for months, a woman in financial crimes whose brother had once received treatment at Mercy South. Darius's Gala recording, which had captured Patrice accusing Naomi, Everett moving against her, and Ji-woon presenting the foundation documents, was uploaded before anyone in the Brooks family could convince him to delete it. The ballroom camera footage went to the charity board, the clinic board, and 3 journalists whose inboxes had been waiting for corroboration. Ji-woon's Korean network blocked Suk-min's port accounts before dawn in Seoul, freezing shipments through Busan and Incheon under the clean language of compliance review. Nobody needed to vanish. They only needed to be unable to move money. Everett was arrested first, still wearing his tuxedo shirt with no bow tie, outside a private airstrip where he had apparently believed panic could become escape if fueled by enough cash. Patrice was taken in 2 hours later after telling 3 different stories about the bracelet, the bag, and the phone call that had sent Min to Naomi's apartment. Suk-min lasted longest because men raised inside powerful families often mistake delay for control, but Ji-woon's uncle in Seoul publicly disowned him before lunch Korean time, and that mattered in a world where family protection was both shield and currency. The final image Naomi saw on Yerin's tablet was Suk-min walking through Incheon Airport between 2 prosecutors, his expensive coat unbuttoned, his face stripped of the entitlement that had made him careless. Naomi spent the rest of the night at the hospital, not as an employee, not as a patient, but as the person residents kept asking for. Miss Clara was stable. Mr. Alvarez had smoke irritation, but was complaining loudly enough to reassure everyone. The twins fell asleep across 2 plastic chairs with Naomi's cardigan over them. Ji-woon sat beside Naomi in the corridor, his ribs bruised from going through her apartment window when the hallway became impassable, saying nothing because there were no clean words for a night that had burned her home and saved her name in the same breath. Naomi stared at the vending machine across from them, at the rows of chips and peanut crackers and bad coffee, and then reached into her bag for the brass key. It had survived the Gala, the SUV, the curb, the smoke, everything. She placed it in Ji-woon's palm. "I kept this because I was scared," she said, her voice rough from smoke and more honesty than comfort. "Not because I didn't trust you. Because trusting you meant admitting my life had already changed, and I was tired of changes that came with bills attached." Ji-woon closed his fingers around the key, then opened them again and gave it back to her. "Keep it because you choose to," he said. "Not because you are afraid." That was the thing about him that undid her most, not the cars or the men or the sole name that made businessmen lower their voices, but the way he could hold power in both hands, and still understand that love was not ownership unless you ruined it. 3 weeks later, Mercy South's board voted to remain open under emergency public oversight, funded by seized foundation assets and a Korean medical trust Jawoon created in his grandmother's name, with Naomi hired as patient relations director because every nurse, resident, and exhausted mother in the waiting room already knew she had been doing the work without the title. Patrice's apology came through a lawyer and meant nothing. Aunt Marlene left 2 voicemails full of tears and confusion, and Naomi deleted the first but saved the second because her mother asked her to wait before closing every door. Forgiveness, Naomi had decided, was not a performance for people who arrived late to remorse. It was a house she would build slowly, with locks she controlled. On the first dry morning after the fire damage crews finished boarding her apartment windows, Naomi returned to the building with Jawoon. The hallway smelled like wet wood, smoke, and chemical cleaner, but sunlight came through the broken stairwell window and fell across the floor in a bright, uneven square. Her bed was ruined, the shoebox gone, the old birthday cards curled at the edges from water, and for a moment grief pressed both hands against her chest. Jiwoon did not tell her it was only things. He had learned better than that. He picked up one card that had survived inside a plastic sleeve, her grandmother's handwriting still visible, and handed it to Naomi as carefully as if it were a royal document. Months later, when the rebuilt clinic opened its new wing, Naomi stood in front of the brass plaque bearing Jiwoon's grandmother's name and watched children run across floors that no longer smelled like neglect. She wore a deep green dress tailored to her body instead of apologizing for it, her hair pinned back with gold clips, her full figure steady and unapologetic beneath the bright lobby lights. Jiwoon stood beside her, not in front, not behind, one hand resting lightly at her back where only she could feel it. Reporters asked about corruption, charity fraud, international crime, and the fire, but Naomi answered the question they did not know how to ask. "I was never rescued because I was helpless," she said, looking once toward Jiwoon and then back at the cameras. "I was protected because I had already been fighting, and this time, someone powerful enough to stand beside me chose not to look away." That evening, after the cameras left and the clinic quieted into its familiar rhythm of coughs, footsteps, printers, and children asking for vending machine snacks, Naomi found Jiwoon in the old intake room where they had first met. The new security camera above the door worked now. The crash cart stood exactly where it belonged. Rain tapped against the alley window, softer than that first night, but close enough to remember. Jiwoon turned when she entered, the jade rosary around his wrist, the scar beneath his shirt, the whole dangerous history of him standing in a room made safer because she had once refused to leave him bleeding on the floor. Naomi took his hand and placed the brass key in it one last time, then closed his fingers around hers until they were both holding it. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside that small clinic room, where fear had first become choice, Naomi Brooks finally had proof that the people who tried to make her small had only taught her how much room her courage could fill.